Today I'm joined by AJ Sharp. AJ's the managing director of Sharp Relations, who are a leading food and drink brand awareness agency. So welcome, AJ.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me on, Simon.
Oh no, thank you for joining us. Look, AJ, for anyone that doesn't know Sharp Relations, how would you describe what you do and who you do it for?
So, in essence, we're a PR and communications agency,
Hmm.
and we focus very much on food and drink. And food and drink clients can expand a little bit into kind of travel and lifestyle and some of the kind of nice leisure entertainment stuff that goes alongside that. But the food and drink scope might be all the way from a grower or a primary producer, a farmer, all the way through manufacturers, other producers, people who are maybe making chutney at home in their kitchen, all the way through to people who are working, have a big factory to do that. Our biggest client, for example, is Fever Tree. Yet we also have some really small clients who are right at the beginning of their journey. And I love the variety you get from that.
Oh, that sounds great. And is that do you primarily focus locally or are you national? Have you got a particular market, like geographical market that you focus on, or?
No, we're always UK in terms of the services we provide, which are PR, social media, communications, any kind of marketing, anything really that's going to grow your brand and it's kind of communications based. That's where we get involved. So that could be Google Ads to PR to influencer marketing, all the way across the spectrum. And that is in a UK region.
Right.
The clients themselves, however, are international. They could be international, they could be UK, and they could be from Kent. We
Okay.
obviously, being that we're based in Kent,
Yeah.
have a very, a deep fondness for our county and seeing it do a bit better than the other counties. So I love having some Kent clients.
Bit of healthy competition there with other counties. I
Always.
like it. But no, okay, great. Look, thanks for explaining that. So, oh, there's my doorbell going. Well, apologies for that. So, look, tell us a little bit more about how you got into the business, because I think it's you founded it back in 2010. Is that right? Have I got that right?
Hmm. Yeah, so I graduated from Newcastle University and went to London. Um, and started in actually, I had a complete full start and started in a recruitment agency that was absolutely dreadful. I didn't last more than 6 weeks. It was very cutthroat, and I was not at all of a disposition to be good at the thing. And that didn't work out at all. And I ended up falling via a netball match and a bit of luck and serendipity into a PR agency, which just so happened to be a combination of all my favorite things: talking, writing, and food and drink. So I was absolutely cock a hoop to have discovered this beautiful agency on the Fulham Road, and they specialized in wine and beer PR. So that's where I cut my teeth. After a few years there, really learning the craft of PR and making friends with all these incredible and glamorous people across London and going to a lot of fancy parties, I then changed to a different agency. Next one was called Storm Communications. And then finally, I wound up at Wildcard PR. And they're much bigger agencies, really fun. They've got some beautiful brands on their kind of rosters, and it was really good fun. But there was a point at which I've been doing it for about 5 or 6 years, I think. I was an account director, which was I was quite young to be an account director. I was only 26 when I was made an AD, which yeah, I was probably 3 or 4 years behind my counterparts. And I had a real moment where there was a combination of me sitting on a board meeting and realizing that I thought we were missing things. And every time I made a point, because I was the baby at the table, people weren't really listening, which is, fair enough. I didn't have very much experience and I probably wasn't correct about it at the time or in their particular situation. However, I could see opportunity that I could see that they weren't doing, where I just thought there was an opportunity there to do something slightly differently. I enjoyed working there, but it kind of came to a natural close where I'd gone home for the weekend. Oh, I also had a boyfriend in Scotland,
Oh,
in the military, and that had made things feel really difficult because if I wanted to catch the last flight to get up to Inverness by a particular point, I needed to leave the office. And, when you're working for somebody else, you can't just leave the office whenever you want, or you certainly couldn't back then. So it was a combination of lots of different things. I'd had all these ideas. I could see some opportunity. I, maybe thought I knew best, which, you always do when you're 26. And I had this boyfriend that I couldn't actually visit at all because of, the confines of my 9 to 5 job. So the combination meant that I decided to set out on my own, and that was in 2010. And my father, bless his soul, he was an entrepreneur himself. He'd set up many businesses and loved any person who ever gave a thing a go. That was his real passion in life. And he was great. I remember coming home for the weekend and saying, I'm going to set up my own agency. This is what I'm going to do. And my mother going, oh, I'm not really sure that's a good idea. Shouldn't you have a stable job? And my father going, brilliant. What's it going to look like? How's it going to be? How are you going to do it? You're going to need a premises. You're going to need a phone line. You're going to a fax machine. Sure. All the things. And he really supported. He didn't give me any money, but he did give me his time and his attention and his advice, and was particularly very influential for me during that period of time where I'm learning to handle clients completely and utterly on my own, including having to negotiate money and things, which, you can handle a client as an AD on a strategic level, but then suddenly having to talk to somebody about money and being, British and finding all of that stuff deeply uncomfortable. There was a huge learning curve to go through there of how to handle these kinds of things. And he really mentored me through that period of time, which was, lovely.
Fantastic. Look, that's a great story, and I love hearing about how people sort of started out in business. And when you were interested in when you were younger, when you were at school, university, had it occurred to you then about becoming a business owner? Had you sort of thought about being a business owner, or was it purely that set of circumstances that you just described that you suddenly thought, you know what, I'm going to become a business owner?
No, I always wanted to be a business
You
owner, I
always
think.
wanted. Okay.
At university, I I always seem to fall into sort of leadership roles, or even from my university job of being at Pizza Express, where someone said, we need to find a manager. I'm the first there with my hand up going, I'll do it. Or at university, I ended up running the ski board, the ski and snowboard club at Newcastle University, which was a huge club at that time. So we take holidays away of, maybe 1,000 people, and just organizing loads of people and the buzz of all of that. I just loved it. I love people. I find people absolutely fascinating and love being around lots of people. So I think it was always natural to want to create something like that.
Okay.
Not
And you mentioned earlier then about, you started out in business. Your father gave you sort of time and knowledge, which, by the way, I think is one of the most valuable things you can give somebody is time. Your time. So, and you said there was a number of obstacles, challenges. What would you say was the biggest challenge that you faced being a business owner?
well, there's two iterations to sharp relations. There's that first one that I've already described of starting out. I only really have myself to please and rent to pay. So relatively few responsibilities in the world. And so this is the kind of pre-kids era where actually, as long as I've made about 600 quid, I'm fine, because I could go next door and mum will feed me, but basically I'm fine. And that was lovely. And I grew the company. I think we grew up to about 5 grand turnover a month, which at the time felt like a phenomenal amount of money. And then the boyfriend turned into a husband. And because of his work, we started to have to move around the country a lot. And a couple of kids turned up, a whole load of raft of other complications. But I continued to maintain the company throughout this period. It had varying degrees of revenue throughout this period, but there wasn't a single month where I didn't bill anything. So even, literally the month I'd had children, I was still doing it, or I had contractors or freelancers come in to cover my workload so that I could have mat leave. In those days, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I had kids 10 and 12 years ago, but you kept it quiet. You didn't talk about your children. You certainly didn't mention that you were having to have some time off to go and have a baby. So I just sort of seamlessly made sure that nothing really changed too much for anybody, and it carried on. And I had some lovely clients who were have become since actually quite good friends, and were very supportive during that period. And I was lucky for that. But I kept it going. When we moved back to Kent, my dear old dad was not well. So I wanted to be back and be close to him. And we moved back, and I had a moment where I remember saying to my husband, I could actually make this into a thing. Like this could potentially support us. And Martin just went, well, go on then, go for it. Let's see what happens. So I did, and I got myself a little premises over in Smarden and started to build a small team and just started to see how far can I push this.
Yeah.
And we built the company. My husband actually joined for a year or two because I was having a moment where I said, there's just so much going on now. I've got to get pensions for all the people that I'm employing. I've got to get my head around payroll. We need staff handbooks. We need due diligence and policies and fire things and health and safety and, ethical workplace policies and all the different things. I'm just getting completely and utterly overwhelmed by administration, along with the fact that, we've got two small children that I need help with. And my husband, who wasn't necessarily loving whatever it was he was doing at that point, said, well, why don't I join you? So he joined the company for a couple of years, and it was fab. It really helped the company to grow enormously because he, with his background, just took a lot of that policy stuff off me. And this is before the year, the age of Chat GPT. You actually had to write these things from scratch. He wrote all of our policies, all our health and safety, our staff handbook. He got us, what's the word he uses? Street legal. He got us street legal on everything, and was really good at going on the websites and making sure that we'd done all the things that we didn't know we had to do and all that stuff. Which was fab. And then after a couple of years was like, right, he was ready to go off and do his own thing again. But in that period of time, we grew loads. In fact, when he was leaving, we'd gone to, I think we were at 12, staff of 12. We had a big, lovely double office premises at Evegate Business Park, which was fab, with a studio, because I do a lot of podcasting as well and radio stuff. And it's really useful for media training. And it was very much kind of exactly what I wanted to build. And I had a moment that year, well, it was 2022 that my dear old dad passed. And so 2023 was a year where we grew from 8 people to 13 people. And it was so full on. I didn't grieve for a minute for the passing of my dad. I just got my head down and did all the stuff. And it was nuts. I think I was just numb, though, for a whole year. I don't think I had any emotion, any real emotional range when I look back, because I was just numb, just get the job done. And we grew absolutely loads, but it was a really interesting period, because 2024, I then went to do the Goldman Sachs 10K small business course, which is like a mini MBA. You do that at University of Oxford. Absolutely fascinating. And halfway through it, and they're talking about AI and how to integrate AI into every single function of your business, from operations through to production, through to marketing, through to everything. And I had a moment halfway through the course where I went, I'm building a PR agency based on a model that's from the early noughties, from when I started working in a PR agency, that isn't actually based on today's working world and where we're going. And so I had a sort of existential crisis at that point of going, I've done it wrong. Oh, it's a big one as well. It's a big mistake to have to unpick. So I have spent the last year unpicking and slowly, reducing the team down and integrating different AI facilities in. Other challenges, Mrs. Reeves is making things quite challenging for lots of small businesses, with national insurance contributions and many other interesting taxes being thrown around. It has made employing a large team very much a different prospect than it was even 2 or 3 years ago, and not necessarily a risk that I'm prepared to carry anymore.
I think, what you've sort of described there, AJ, is real. I think, it's firstly really common in businesses, the challenge that they face from stepping up as they grow, stepping up to the next level, the additional sort of things that brings, that you were talking about, that admin and policies and procedures. It starts taking you away from, it's that working in the business to working on the business, and all the things that come with that, marketing and sales and finance and all those other things that go with it, and that challenge of doing that. But also the other thing that you highlighted there that really sort of stands out is that how businesses just generally grow, not necessarily by design and structure, but just grow through organic growth and this happening, that happening. But actually, when you take it back, as you've done by going on that Goldman Sachs thing of going, actually, how do we want this business to run? Okay, how do we want it to run for something that's sustainable, something for the future, something that we can build on? Then you start to design it. Then you start to saying, right, okay, what do we need to do? And that, I think a lot of business owners go through that. So it's really interesting to hear you sort of share that as well. And AJ, if you could wave a magic wand and solve one challenge in your business now, what would that be?
I don't know. I feel like I've done a lot of magic wand waving over the last 18 months and had to make some incredibly difficult decisions.
Yeah.
And really feel like for the first time in my life, I actually have to pretend to be a grown up, which is something I've never felt like a grown up, but I really have had to make some horrible grown up decisions. And it's been really tough. So I feel like I've done my magic wand waving in that 18 months ago, I waved my wand and said, I want a much more compact office and environment to be able to actually focus on the strategy and delivery of services to the clients rather than spending such an enormous amount of time getting everything, getting a whole team of people ready to do a thing. It actually, because the way in which the marketing and agency world has evolved over the past, particularly 2 years, but 5 years,
Yeah.
and the way it is going, the sophistication of AI related tools in marketing is absolutely through the roof.
Yeah.
Agencies like mine, in its old iteration, aren't going to exist in 10 years' time.
Yeah.
However, there is an absolute market for somebody with the experience to understand how to use that tool to its maximum effect. And that's where I think we're going to come in. So I think we've done that. And I think we're there. And I feel finally like, we are giving really good service to the clients. And it's not completely stressing my nut every single time, because the stress of a big team was just, it was phenomenal. But if I did have a magic wand, I would make Food Rebels make money, because I run it as Food Rebels is my food and drink podcast. It has a phenomenal following and it's syndicated through loads of different radio stations around the country, which is how I've grown its listenership so high. But it doesn't make any money. And it's
Right.
really nuts it doesn't, because it's it really should. So that would be my magic wand of like monetizing and fixing it without it losing its journalistic integrity.
Yeah. Yeah, just changing how that's that it's income producing. Okay, no, I get that, and I think again what you explained about AI there, and I've mentioned it a couple of times on this previous podcast. What I've done with people is that actually like yours, PR agencies. So AI won't replace PR agencies. However, PR agencies that use AI will replace PR agencies that don't. And I think
True.
that's what really sort of sums up. And that, by the way, I think that goes to say for the same as me, in terms of my primary role being a business coach and executive coach, etc., is that I don't believe AI will replace business coaches, but business coaches that use AI will replace those that don't. And that, so what you're doing in thinking about, well, how can we use it? How can we build it into what we do? How can we, develop it? And that's the key thing. And I love that you're doing there. And I was going to say to you, what is your, what's your biggest learning? So would you say that that's your biggest learning in terms of taking that step back and going, right, let's work out now how I want this business to run, or was there something else?
So many lessons, so much learning.
Mm.
My biggest learning, when you're grieving, you're a really terrible leader.
Mm, yeah,
I can definitely put my hands up and say that, because you make yourself numb to stuff that you can't be numb to.
yeah.
And it's only once you start to come out of the fog that you're like, woof, I have not been where I needed to be. That's
Mm,
tough. Um, what works as a sort of freelancer plus one or two, which is, I think, a lot of small businesses in this country, is like a solopreneur or a sort of single person, with capability selling some sort of service and one or two people around them supporting it.
mm,
That model in itself doesn't scale.
yeah,
And I realized that because my learning there was that what I can do when I've, set the conditions and created the environment and negotiated all the contracts, what I can do is obviously faster than other people because I literally created the whole world, the whole environment.
yeah.
And when you employ other people, they're not going to do things exactly the same way you are. So they're going to need to learn their own ways. And then suddenly you've got 4 or 5 people doing things their own way because that is natural. But a system which is only really supporting one way of doing things.
Mm,
So that was something that I learned. And it, again, now, if I now wanted to build a business, I reckon I'd build a really good one because I feel like I've messed up so many different things and screwed up so many different areas. But, to have got a company with 13 people or 12, nearly 13 people, down to about 3 plus 5 or 6 freelance and contractors who support us, but billing basically the same revenue. That is like insane efficiency,
yeah.
which and we are producing, I think, a much better product now. And that's because the clients have way more of our time. So rather than us running the business as the most experienced people in the service we're offering, myself and Claire and some of my other colleagues, we were having to run the business rather than running the services.
Mm,
Whereas now we've flipped it on its head and we do have people supporting us, which is fantastic. But I've outsourced, all bookkeeping. I've outsourced a whole load of like lead generation. We've outsourced the stuff that we're not actually very good at. We've kept the stuff that we're really good at. So I now reckon we're more efficient. Clients are getting a better service. They're getting way more of our actual consultation and time. And some of the other kind of legwork, I guess, is being outsourced and we're being supported by an absolutely fantastic team who are helping to make a lot of it happen. So it's there's so much learning. I literally couldn't just pick one thing.
I think, look, and again, I really share that. I think it's a shame sometimes that business owners, majority of the time, only end up running and owning one business because exactly what you said. Because once they've been through that learning experience and had made all those, well, let's call them mistakes, but I prefer to call them as learning opportunities. You're absolutely right. If they actually then went and created a second business, it'd be so much better because of what they've learned. And I will mention there's a great book that I love and I recommend to all business owners to read, whether they're starting out or whether they're in business. And I don't know whether you're familiar with it. It's called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And it's one of the best business books that I've read. And it actually really encapsulates what you've just said there, AJ, about creating a business that runs on processes and systems. And actually what it says in that book is create your business as though it could be franchised. Because and that's not to say that you do franchise it, but if you get to a position where it could be franchised, that's where you've got it systemized and all working.
A
So
100% agree with that. It's like I've got a client I'm working with at the moment, right at the beginning of their story, they're a startup,
mm,
and right from even the sales, I'm like, let's just get a CRM right now, even though you've only got 5 leads, and put it into the CRM and get it set up and get it working. Because if all goes according to plan, in a year's time, we're going to employ a national account manager who's then going to take the CRM, and you don't then have to get all the little bits of paper and back of envelopes and business cards off your desk or from wherever. It's all there in one place, ready to go, booming.
absolutely. And
And
then
it's
look, that's a good example of, yeah, starting off, even when putting the processes and systems in place when you're small, even when you're just doing it yourself, so that is, as you said earlier, then that can be scaled. If it's all up in your head, you can't scale that. But if it's all in systems and processes, CRMs, that sort of thing, it can be scaled. So yeah, great. Look, and AJ, there's one question I like to ask everybody that's kind enough to join me on this session, and that's this: what advice would you give to an 18-year-old you?
Continually invest in your education.
Yeah.
And English literature is only so useful. But it will give you a lifelong love of readings, which is never a bad thing. But no, continual investment in education. I am constantly doing a course. I know some people, you could get to the point where they call it procrastinating, don't they? Where, oh no, I can't do that. I just need to do another quick course on it. But equally, I think I was born with the how hard can it be gene? The sort of, it's like people saying to me, well, how have you created an AI agent that does a thing and pulls a thing from a thing? I went on YouTube and I watched a video because someone had been kind enough to make a 5-minute YouTube on it. Just constant learning. If you continually invest in yourself, you'll never regret it. Just constant learning. Just keep learning, and then things start to click together, and people think you're cleverer than you probably are.
Again, I really agree with that. I think learning never stops. I've got a whole bookcase next to me here of books that I'm continually reading to learn things, as you say, listening to podcasts, watching YouTube, all that sort of thing. Continued learning, because, well, as you explained earlier, the world is constantly changing. So if we don't keep learning, we're actually moving backwards. Because the world around us is moving. So if we're not moving, we're moving backwards. So yeah, continually learn. I think that's great advice. So thank you for sharing that, AJ. And look, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and sharing more about your business, but also your journey as well. So thank you very much.
Oh, thanks, Simon. It was really nice to come on your show.